Hi there. As we're going into a new year, more and more people, of course, are thinking of actually making this the year that they're going to finally get fit, lose a lot of weight, and really turn over a new chapter in their lives. But is it possible to do that just with a diet, or even just with obesity surgery? Many people are finding that that on its own is not enough, and they're beginning to come round to the fact that maybe you've got to address what's going on in there as well. What actually triggers overeating? What makes you different from the person next door? You overeat, maybe you are a comfort eater, maybe you eat for other reasons, and there are certain triggers that you need to understand in order to really turn over that new chapter in your life. Cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT. It's a term that keeps cropping up more and more often now. Some of our members are saying that it worked wonders for them. Other people are asking about it. I thought it was about time you found out. So I went along to the University of Oxford to meet Christina Downing-Orr. Now, she's written many books about CBT. She's a university lecturer. She's a real expert on the subject. And I asked her to explain to us, what is CBT? How does it work? What does it do? How long does it go on for? What sort of a therapy is it? And is it something that really will make a difference?
People do feel the need to maybe overeat when they don't really want to, once they understand there's some kind of emotional connection. Then it's great to have the support of other people who understand, because we're often surrounded by people who don't get us or don't get the problems that we're experiencing.
Well, we all, and we do all react to different problems in different ways.
Absolutely. But sometimes the people that we hope for to provide us support and understanding don't. And it's sometimes easier to speak to a stranger, to speak to somebody.
I think a lot of families and relatives can help really sabotage
Absolutely.
other people's... Why? Why does that happen so much?
Well, there is a French philosopher called Montesquieu who once said, it's not enough for us to be happy. We have to be happier than our friends and our family.
Mm. So it's competition.
It's competition. So if we know, our lives might be in the doo-doo, but at least we're not that person who's really in the doo-doo, and that can make us feel better about ourselves. It's kind of a nasty side to human behaviour.
Yeah. So if you're fat, you're trying to do something about it, and you've got lots of friends and relatives saying, "Oh no, you don't need to do anything. Have another cream cake."
Yeah.
They're trying to sabotage you because they really quite like their position with you being probably fatter than they are. It makes them feel better about who they are.
It can make them feel better. And also, if you're addressing your problems, it means that maybe, I'm going to have to start thinking about addressing my problems, and I don't want to do that, or I can't do it. So if you don't address your problems, it means I don't have to address mine, and then everybody's happy in our misery together. That can happen as well. And I think sometimes we need to look outside our closest support for help and assistance, and whether that's your GP or psychologists or other people. Support groups, self-help groups are great arenas of support.
If there was anyone watching now who feels that they are very overweight, they've got a problem, they want to do something about it, does that mean they do have a psychological issue to address?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. The first thing I would always say to people is go to your GP. If you want to lose weight, I want to make sure that people are healthy, there's no underlying cause, go on a healthy diet, work with your GP. And if people can't stick to their diets, or they find that they're eating, binge eating, particularly binge eating would be a trigger for me, particularly after a stressful event or in response to a stressor, then I'd say there might be some kind of psychological problem underpinning that behaviour.
And that's where CBT might come in.
And that's where CBT comes in.
So what is CBT?
Right. CBT is a rather new type of therapy to help people with all kinds of problems. And we're now just using it with dieting and overeating. But basically, in a nutshell, CBT can be defined as this. It's not an event that causes us distress. It's our beliefs about ourselves that causes that distress. So, for example, if you have a fight with your husband and then you resort to the cream cakes because you're upset, it's not the fight that's triggering that. It's the emotions that fight brings out. We're always fighting, we're never happy, he's always putting me down, I'll never be perfect. All these kind of undercurrent thoughts are occurring. And we turn to food, perhaps, because it makes us feel better, it calms us down. So I always say to people, remember, it's not the fight, or it's not the fact that you can't get into the dress you wanted to get into, or maybe you don't feel that you're so happy with your appearance that causes the binge eating or the overeating, but it's the belief about yourself that underpins that behavior.
And then how do you attack that? How do you address that belief?
First, you have to identify the belief. So what I always say to people is, okay, keep a diary or some kind of chart. So the next time that you go into a binge eating episode or have a binge eating behavior, you write it down. You say, Saturday night, I wanted to go to this party. I couldn't fit into this dress that I really wanted to fit into. So I felt so upset that I just went down and I raided the food cupboard. So I say to people, okay, let's look at the reasons why you felt bad. Was it just because the dress didn't fit? Or what did that say about you? What were those feelings that it brought out in you? And usually they're things like, I didn't feel attractive, I'm not attractive, and that means I'm alone, or that I'm worthless, or that I'm morally bankrupt because I can't be thin like all my friends. And we really beat ourselves up with these emotions. And it's usually because we feel so bad based on our beliefs that we resort to the kind of binge eating behavior that just leads to the cycle of feeling worse about ourselves. So then we feel like a failure because we didn't stick to the diet, or that we're not eating healthily, and that just feeds right back into that cycle again. So the first thing you need to do is find out what triggers the behavior, the binge eating behavior, and then what I tend to tell people is to analyze the feelings in themselves, and then what we do is redress the balance.
So, okay, so somebody says, well, I binge ate that night because I was feeling absolutely worthless, because I always fall off diets, they never do any good, I always eat a bit of chocolate and that makes me feel as though I'm a complete failure. So what do you do about that feeling once you've got that feeling and you've identified it?
Usually people will say, for example, I'm a complete failure. I couldn't stick to the diet yet again. This is the 100th diet I've been on. I tried to stick to it. I'm a failure. And so we need to examine all the reasons why people feel that they are a failure. And chances are they're not a failure at all. Probably they're not a failure ever. It's just in this one particular episode, they've just let themselves down. But that doesn't mean that they can't learn about themselves or learn how to take steps to improve. So once we tease out what that emotional factor is that underpins that behavior, then we can start to build up the person's self-esteem and confidence so that the next time they can't fit into the dress, they don't immediately go for the biscuit tin. They start thinking, okay, what do I need to do to get into the size 8 dress or 10 dress or whatever their goal is?
Or maybe it wouldn't be a total tragedy if it was a size 12 dress. Or,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's not the end of the world. It's okay, you'll get there if you want to get there. But if you don't get there in the time frame, it's not a disaster. It's not, the world's not going to fall apart. And it doesn't mean that you're a complete failure if you don't.
Now, you see, that in itself doesn't sound like groundbreaking. So
Yeah.
in the end, if you do get to identify those feelings, identify the counter to those feelings, in the end, that gets through to the brain, does it? It develops a different behaviour.
It does. Instead of, the automatic position becomes, instead of I feel bad about myself, I'm going to reach for the biscuit tin. Instead, we have this kind of mindset change. I feel bad. I'm going to look at the reasons why I feel bad, and I'm going to take steps to make myself feel better in a way that's not destructive. So a positive, beneficial way to make me feel better about myself, or a way that's not going to sabotage how I feel about myself anymore. And that's the difference. It's a difference between, right, I can't fit into this dress, I feel bad, biscuit tin. I can't get into this dress, I feel bad, but you know what? So what? I'm going to see friends I like myself, they like me no matter how I look. And besides, I really wouldn't want to be around people so shallow that the only way they're going to accept me is if I wear a size 10 dress. Mm-hmm. And then the whole mind shift about friends and family and self-expectations change. And even if they seem quite simple, the results can be quite radical.
It all boils down, doesn't it, to recognising that we're self-medicating with food.
Yeah, that's right. So some people use food the way others use alcohol or drugs or overspending or gambling or even exercising. People sometimes go into the gym and exercise like mad as a way of coping with bad feelings about themselves. So once you realize that actually the behavior that you're engaging in, whatever it is destructive and doing you no good, once you actually recognize that, it's making the unconscious conscious. Once you actually recognize that, you can take steps to improve.
It's not that there's anything wrong with eating to... It's not that there's anything wrong with eating, it's eating to self-medicate.
That's right, exactly.
I mean, some people could do it by just saying, I feel a bit low, I'm going to have a tub of ice cream, and call it a day, half a tub of ice cream. Others would never call it a day, they'll go on and on and on eating more and more.
Well, that's
it's when it becomes destructive.
It's when it becomes destructive, and when you start to feel bad about yourself for doing it, when you start to feel guilty, when you start to feel like a failure because you're overeating and overindulging in whatever activity it is, that it has that kind of self-destructive feel about it, that secretive. Some people like to hide away that they're overeating, or they don't want their friends to know or their family to know that they're overeating or overspending or drinking too much. It's when it steps beyond the bounds of being normal that's the problem.
So anyone interested in CBT, is it something that goes on and on and on for years and years, or does it? You do have a course of 10, or what? How does it work
Right.
usually?
It tends to be a very short-term strategy with a therapist, and basically the therapist will teach people how to become their own therapists. They'll teach them the tools that they need to identify the triggers, identify the underlying emotions, maintaining that destructive behavior, and ways to cope or redress the balance so that their behaviors become more beneficial. So basically, you're taught to become your own therapist, and that could take 6 sessions, sometimes up to 10 sessions, and often there could be some kind of review session. But once you get the principles, then you become your own therapist, and that's empowering in itself.